Trailblazers Impact brings you inspirational tales of female empowerment. Our new feature is a resources page with a toolbox for productivity in your business and personal life. We have a link to our resource products, including webinars, a book, and classes. And we have a recommended reading page. Go to trailblazersimpact.com to join us for lively entertainment and practical tips.
This is Nan McKay, and I would like to introduce you today to Pat Lynch. In 1969, at the age of 25, Pat Lynch, having already served as the press secretary for a U.S. senator and congressman, founded her first advertising agency in Atlanta, Georgia, becoming the first woman to begin an advertising agency single-handedly in the South. By 1977, she had been listed twice in the world's Who's Who of Women, in the International Who's Who and Strathmore's Who's Who. In 1998, she founded WomensRadio to give women a greater voice. So let's hear the story of this fascinating woman who has been the wind beneath the wings of many other women. So welcome, Pat.
Thank you so much, Nan. It's really a pleasure to join you.
Pat, at the age of 25, you served as a press secretary for that U.S. senator and congressman. So start there. Did you major in journalism, marketing, or civics? Number one. And number two was, well, how did you land this job? And tell us a story about that time in your life. Just give us some background.
I love to review that time. It was so much fun. Sometimes you really don't know when your bushel of blessings is going to arrive, but it certainly arrived at my doorstep sooner. My mother had always been involved in politics. I started actually when I was 9 years old, going door to door, handing out leaflets. I didn't know any better, and it was fun to meet people. So I enjoyed it. But she continued her work while I went to school and went to college. And I was invited to go with her one time to a fundraising lunch, and there I met the senator. Now, this senator had been appointed because our state senator, I was from Tennessee, had died. That was Estes Kefauver. Most people remember, or even from the history books, Senator Kefauver. And when he died, Ross Bass was put in his place. So he had to run again in 2 years. I happened to meet up with him at a political party rally. I think it was in January, sometime in Nashville. And he said, why don't you come go? There are a whole bunch of us going to another party. Why don't you walk with me and go to the other party? And I said, oh, sure, I'd love to do that. And on the way, I was going on about getting a job with McGraw-Hill in New York, and that I wanted to volunteer up there. He said, well, I thought you were going to help me with my campaign. And I said, well, I'd love to, but I have to get paid. And he said, well, okay. And I never even asked how much. So we walked and agreed, and that was it. And at the day after I left college, I picked up my brand new little car that my mother co-signed for me and got my walking orders, as it were, my driving orders. And I drove the entire state of Tennessee for 2 months, organizing all the colleges in the state of Tennessee for the senator. And then I also spent the next 2 months traveling with his wife, who was a princess. I learned so much. I was the person that stood one step behind her and wrote everybody's names down. And when everybody else went to sleep, then I stayed up and wrote all the thank you notes. I don't think people write thank you notes anymore, Nan, but it was very effective. And from there, unfortunately, Tennessee is very interesting. It has an open primary. There are only 3 states that do. And if anybody really wants to know how it can work, I'll share this information. So the Republicans got a grip and said, well, let's go in their primary and vote for the weaker candidate. And then in the general election, we'll just vote for our candidate. That's exactly what they did. And so my senator lost, and that became Howard Baker's first term in office. Well, I I was asked if I wanted to go to Washington. I definitely wanted to do that. Now, ultimately, my goal was still to get to Atlanta, where a job awaited me, as it were. And when I went to Washington, because everybody else was bailing, I got to do the most fascinating things. I got to go to a press conference with Senator Everett Dirksen. I'll just never forget that. So the things that were going on then were historic, literally. And I learned a lot in a very short period of time. But then there would come an end to that, and I knew it. So I started scouting around for another job and up there, and found a newly elected congressman from Georgia. And I thought, aha, they're bound to have to send someone to Georgia, and it's going to be me. So I joined that staff, and sure enough, there came a day when there was a little meeting, and I kind of knew what was going to be asked, and I was sitting on the edge of my seat. It's amazing I didn't fall right off on the floor raising my hands. I felt like the donkey in the back saying, pick me, pick me. And they did. And so I was sent to Atlanta, and fortunately that job didn't last very long. It was very dull. But then I started working for a major advertising agency that was based in Atlanta. And from there, as I say, one good or bad thing led to the next. And at the age of 25, I had a choice. Either I was going to be going to work for another agency, also male dominated, and also not being fair to women, or I was going to do it myself. And I had a dream in the middle of the night that made me sit straight up in bed. And I thought, I'll never sleep again if I don't make this decision. So I said, okay. And I got started. And as they say, when you do get started, especially on your path, people come to help you. It's so remarkable. I got to meet some really remarkably talented people who helped me. And one good thing after the next kept happening. I ended up specializing in real estate because Atlanta is a real estate town, and I loved it. But then, unfortunately, there was a falling off the cliff period. And so a lot of real estate ended up in bankruptcies, and we tried to help as many developers as we could, but at some point, everything fell in the ocean. So at that point, there was a huge change in my life, which would bring me to the next big thing, I guess, on the list.
So question mark, where in time was this? Was this in?
Well, I started the agency, I believe it was 1969, and it lasted up through the end of 1975, 76. So it was a very interesting time.
So also in your 20s, you were the first woman to begin an advertising agency single-handedly in the South. So how did you get from government to the advertising agency? Where was the link there? And how did you choose that business? Just because real estate was booming at the time?
Well, actually, I applied for a job in public relations with this agency who had a public relations arm. I feel like I'm just naturally really good at it. In fact, when I was at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, I worked on what's called the Hill in the administration's office. And I didn't do anything very exciting, but so therefore I noticed that no one was writing stories about the various departments. Now, the University of Tennessee then and now, I started in engineering, by the way. They have one of the largest engineering schools in the US, really good. And I was one of only 15 women in a sea of 10,000 men at that time, the 2 years I spent in engineering. So when I changed, they didn't even teach public relations at the university, but by working on the Hill, I simply asked, I said, isn't anybody writing stories about all the different colleges and departments? No, they didn't know of anybody. And I said, well, do you have a press list? No, we don't really have a press list. It's hard to imagine these days with all the things that are available. And I said, well, would you mind if I started a list? Oh, no, go ahead. Don't you love that? When the universe gives you the carte blanche to do the very thing that you're really good at. So I creating a press list. I started writing stories, and then I did switch from engineering into journalism. And as I say, one thing led to the next. So by the time I actually changed from working in a political office to actually working at a big agency with a PR division, I just was eager to go. And I've always been gifted with coming up with ideas for other people that help things work at a bigger level. I love it. I don't know that it's something that I learned in school. It's just something I love to do.
Well, with your advertising agency, you had contracts with a lot of big companies. I mean, we're talking about Turner Outdoor, Coca-Cola, Miller Lite, Citizens Trust Company, LPGA, and yet it seemed like you were still specializing in real estate and political campaigns. Yes or no? And
well, it's kind of a transition. So when I began through a friend, again, I was so lucky that people were willing to help me, because I'm not sure I would have been as eager to help someone 25 with as little experience as I had. So it's interesting that people did see the good things that I can do. And one of my friends came and said, I know that you're just starting your agency. And as luck has it, I've acquired 2 campaigns, and I can only do one of them. And I thought you might like to try the other one. And it's handling the public relations for the Outdoor Association, and you'd be working directly with Ted Turner. Now, Ted Turner didn't even own a radio station at that point, although he did quite a bit, obviously, in the Atlanta area. And I said, I'd love to do that. So I took that on. That was one of my first clients. And I worked directly with Ted Turner throughout the period of time in getting ready for the OAAA convention. And it was a remarkable experience. He was a very interesting person. If anybody's ever read his autobiography, that pretty much describes who he is. And then he began, I think it was 2 radio stations, and then he began Channel 17, and then that became the Superstation. And during that period of time, I had an agency. One of the other people that I was lucky enough to attract was a person who had been sent from New York by BBD&O when they had bought an agency in Atlanta. And he was sent because he was the media planner. So he created himself all of the media plans for all the big clients that they had acquired, plus some others that he was already working on. He did all the plans himself, and he bought all the media. By the time I met him at some advertising party, he said, you've got to get to work. You can't, you're just lounging around. You've really got to work harder at this, and I'll teach you how to do the media. I couldn't resist. I really wanted to learn that. And he was a great teacher, and I learned a lot. Consequently, all the things that we did take on, including the political campaigns that you're talking about, we never lost a campaign that we took. And we created some very happy clients. It was a lot of fun. I was just so lucky to meet so many really great people along the way that taught me so much.
so as someone that's a woman starting out, I'm piecing this together, saying it's being at the right time at the right place. It's, or vice versa, right place, the right time. And it is keeping an open antenna so that when something comes up, you don't just automatically say, oh, this is not, something I'm used to, but you seem to have jumped into it when those opportunities came. You didn't say no, you said yes.
Well, I had an inner push, I'll have to tell you. And I think that I've been lucky in that way. I really do believe, Nan, you may feel the same way, that it's extremely important for everyone, but particularly for women, to listen to their own hearts, to listen to the thing they most love to do. And And I think that if you do that, the universe will support you. It will help you. It will give you hints. It will give you people who come and say, you know, I bet you'd be really good at this, or we need someone to help out over here. And when you can recognize that that's the very thing that you enjoy doing, that you're really good at, you can say, I'll give it a try. You can try. Without any effort, nothing happens, for sure.
Well, and you don't have to take it on the basis of, I'm going to retire in it.
Exactly.
You know, it's just something that you can go from one to another over your life. Nobody today really usually stays in the same job all the way through.
Well, I think people used to think they had to do that. And I know that one of my brothers has done that. I don't think that he's happy with the outcome because of several things, but it doesn't happen much anymore. When I was coming up, everybody did it that way. You're supposed to get a good job. You're supposed to stay there. You retired with a good pension. Well, I guess that still does exist, but I just kind of knew that wasn't going to happen for me. Things didn't happen the same way for women, and women weren't given these chances. In New York, that was a little different. That was when I started, was just after some years after Mary Wells started her agency in New York City. And I don't know if you remember this or not, but she was the person that colored the airplanes different colors. That's what people most remember, I think. So, but those opportunities didn't really happen any outside of a major city like New York City. So
No, we were
I was
lucky to get a job that wasn't a teacher or a nurse.
Exactly. My mother was a nurse, and the only other thing to do was become a teacher, and I didn't want to do those things. My mother fell off her chair when I told her that I wanted to go in engineering. And she said, well, I wouldn't pick that for you, but if that's what you want to do, I support you. That was really brave of her. Parents at all, you know, parents, unless you went into something that was highly acceptable, the tribe didn't want you to do that. So it does take a certain amount of courage to go against the culture, the tribe, and to do the thing that you know you're really good at. And how many people, Nan, have been told, you're going to be an actor or an actress, or you're going to be an artist? What, are you crazy? You'll never be able to make a living doing that. And then look at all the people that made those parents wrong. You know, so my path was just different. Who would have thought that I would have gone from engineering into advertising? But definitely I wasn't cut out to be an engineer. I didn't have the right background going into it, and it wasn't designed, the teaching wasn't designed to include women. It was very difficult. Not that it isn't always difficult, but it was especially difficult for women. And they really didn't want women there, and they told you so.
Well, it kind of made a better match maybe with the journalism, and then going into advertising and doing PR kind of work in between.
Mm-hmm.
I think that made sense for a thread that worked for you.
Yes, that's so true. And then I think the other thing that happened, talking about the real estate, is I ended up happily being introduced to a new partner. He and I are still the very best of friends. We talk often. He and his wife are going to live near where we're about to move to. And I was blessed to have such a good partner. He attracted a person that ended up introducing me to one of my very first mentors, who is still on the planet. I'm so happy. And we're still very good friends and still communicate. It's because of those introductions that we were able to do some really wonderful things. And it gave me courage to do some new things that worked. One of them with my partner was to create something called the Rock and Roller Derby. And he said, that is such a good idea, and you've got to do it, and I'll help you. And he quit what he was doing and helped me do that. That's when we were able to get Coke as one of the sponsors, Miller Beer, a bunch of and it was, we were also a partner with the largest rock station in Atlanta. And we had Cher, who came and rode down Peachtree Street in mobilized roller skates, singing her latest song, Hell on Wheels. It was the most fun. And I wouldn't have given anything for the opportunity to be able to do things like that.
Well, it sounds like you also buy into the role of mentors.
I do. Absolutely. I really didn't know what a mentor, it wasn't common like it is today where everybody talks about finding your mentor. I just was so lucky to meet people like that who cared, who were really, really good at what they did and eager to teach that to other people coming along. And it definitely worked out for everybody. We did some amazing campaigns for and unusual projects. I worked with Mr. Lou Goodkin, that particular mentor, who is still the nation's premier real estate marketing research person, just an incredible person. And he, in Atlanta, took on a project that became the first large, I'd say, plan unit development, the first large project that was auctioned off during the real estate bust. And so we did all the promotion and the advertising for that. And it sold out in one day.
Wow. Wow. That is amazing.
Totally.
Now, you went from Atlanta to the Bay Area of California, I think, locating in Fresno. What was the driver for your choice of location?
Well, in that case, I had gotten married, had a baby, and my husband's father was a premier entrepreneur. He just must have had it in his blood. And he had gone to Stanford to get his master's, and had wanted to go into managing, operating fast food restaurants. He was offered really, really good jobs. At any rate, eventually he started working with people to help begin those himself. One of them was Mini Pearl Fried Chicken, started with another person that I knew separately. Actually met his partner in that when I was campaigning with a senator. This man, his name was John J. Hooker, a real character, really wonderful guy, and he was running for governor. Well, because of his political nature, people wanted to douse his project. That ended up happening, but not before my father-in-law did the most amazing work in selling franchises. He was so good that people were lined up literally around the block with checks in their hand, hoping to be one of the first franchisees. And that was one of the first franchise operations of its kind. So I got to learn from him as well. And I was so impressed with that. I encouraged my husband to work with him in opening up an idea that he had for a double drive-through fast food restaurant, similar to In-N-Out Burgers, where he got the idea from. And he designed a chicken sandwich location. And we helped to name it. It was called Humdinger. It was a great project. The food was so delicious, nobody could stop eating it. Unfortunately, my father-in-law ended up attracting a man who didn't have the best values. How's that? And he ended up dousing it. So we sold out our interest and we moved on to some other things. So that's actually what took us out to California. Had nothing to do with advertising, but of course, I needed to do something at that point. So I went back in and created yet another agency over there. So that kept rolling along like that. And I kept saying, or talking to the universe and saying, but what is my path? What is the thing that's special that you want me to do? Anybody can do these other things that I've done. And eventually, when we moved to the Bay Area, I literally had a vision and was asked to do the work of giving women this larger voice, and that it should be using electronic mediums, which could be done over a broad geographic area. That eventually I was blocked from getting into the Good Old Boys Club the only avenue that ended up being available was the internet, which was really just opening up. And when I got there, there were only 3% women on the web. And you would think, why in the world would you listen to a voice that told you to go do something like that? But it was the only open door. And in 1 year, Nan, it changed from 3% to 45% women to men on the web. Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
Yeah. And you know why?
Fine. Wow.
Because of women's organizations who had learned that sending out newsletters by mail was becoming too expensive. And some people began to learn about email and took everyone by the hand and said, let me show you this new thing. And it's free. You can do this. And that's how it happened. And it happened in a year.
Wow.
Oh, by the way, it was a woman who was persistent, who got AOL to put all those little discs and things out very, very broadly. And it worked. It was a campaign that truly worked. I've never forgotten that.
So tell us a little more just about Women's Radio. Like, you went into the idea and how you founded it, but tell us what it really is, what's unique about it, and then let's talk about the future of it.
I think that because of the way we started, we did have a woman who was a doctor who had done a couple of years in radio, and that went really well. Unfortunately, like I said, the 1996 Telecommunications Act kind of cut our legs off on that. But I began to see that women were looking to have that bigger voice. They needed some help. They needed some instruction. They really didn't, and they were afraid of media because media was never really very friendly to them. And so if you're invited to be a guest on someone's program, they might ask you silly questions or embarrassing questions. Women really didn't like that. So I structured what we did and what we still do to accommodate this brand new medium, the internet and streaming, so that women would feel comfortable and that I would have time with them to share with them how it worked, thereby educating them in this new medium as well. Then we also created a tool to help them called Audio Acrobat. Then we added video. Maybe we should call Audio Video Acrobat, but in it we left the name, but we did add the video. And that was one of the first tools of its kind and included podcasting. Well, podcasting roared for a little bit and then it came down and it kind of came back and then it went down again. And that went back and forth until several years ago when I believe you started and podcasting became the thing. Now everyone thinks that when you are listening or watching something like this, that is just streaming and podcasting are equal, but that's not exactly true. So at Women's Radio, we do what's called on-demand streaming. So it's resident in our servers. When you click on it, it plays immediately. There's no buffering. You can also take a URL for the page that you're looking at, and you can send that to anybody you wish. Podcasting is a different URL, and you can take that and put it on practically an infinite number of podcast directories, which is really good, or in places like YouTube and LinkedIn, et cetera, et cetera. So that has advantages as well. It is all streaming, but they're slightly different. And we do what's called on-demand streaming, although we are about to add some really wonderful new services at Women's Radio, but that's future. We'll talk again.
Do you want to give us any hints on what the direction is that you're going?
Well, I again, part of the vision basically is to give women that larger voice, to give more women more of an opportunity to get their voice and to get their voice out there. So we want to have a podcast directory that will attract a lot of women podcasters. So more of these great women podcasters can be easily found. And then we'd like to include a service that would allow people who've created such content to be able to push a button and have it go out to these much bigger platforms like YouTube, for instance. So that's part of the vision. And then we also would like to attract more women who are offering courses or webinars, things that will help other women in other areas. And so that's some of the vision.
You've also been really active in giving back, what I would call giving back. Tell us about the event that you created in Atlanta, which was described as the largest party for young people that's ever been conducted. Now, with only 3 months to pull together all these details, its time was an all-day event hosting some 10,000 kids in Piedmont Park, which was the largest park in the city. So tell us all about that. What the heck?
Well, even when I went to Washington with a senator, if I had any spare time, I became a volunteer at Walter Reed Hospital. I'm the kind of person that must be busy, I think. I've never failed to have more to do than I could get done. I like it that way. When I went to Atlanta, I'm not sure exactly how I fell into these opportunities, but I was in something called Good Government Atlanta, which ended up helping me meet someone who also provided one of my first clients in business, Citizens Trust Company. And also I got to meet a lot of people who had political aspirations or who were involved in city government, which led me to volunteer for the City Parks Department. And I'm not sure, many people probably, this is too long ago for most people to remember, but there was a time when Atlanta experienced children being kidnapped and killed on a weekly basis. It was just horrible. Whole communities would gather together and go out searching for these children. Because of that, the Parks Department became even more important for the city of Atlanta to be able to keep children safe and give them activities, etc. So we came up with an idea to do a party, especially for children at risk. And seemed like there were far more of them, but I'm not sure that's true. Of course, now there are more people, therefore more children. But it was important for the city to be able to provide something that would really be fun. And we contributed all of our time for free to put this together. We were able to reach out to the Army base that was near Atlanta at any rate. And all the major stores who contributed gifts, and we got all the food donated for free, and we got music entertainment contributed for free. It was really remarkable. It was the first time that rock and roll had ever been in Piedmont Park. So in a short period of time, we did some remarkable things. The Army actually also provided transportation for 10,000 kids to get to Piedmont Park. It was a lot of fun, something I'm very, very proud of. A lot of things just happen because of your own interest. By pushing out just a little bit more, this happens or that happens. And it not only is fun for you, may not be financially rewarding, but a whole lot of fun, gives you brand new experiences, introduces you to a lot of interesting people, and furthers you in some way or another. I feel like that was one of those times when it did that for me.
Well, you've also been on nonprofit boards. So how did that contribute to your career?
I think it's part of, like, when you think about advertising, generally it's not, unless you're working for a company, it's not one thing. So I think one of the appeals of advertising to me is that you can work with people from all kinds of different industries and fields. You can learn a lot and you can help them because you learn the fundamentals of your trade, and then you can apply those to help a lot of different kinds of people. So it pays to get out and meet more people, especially in that industry, which is what I love to do anyway. So it was part of the perks of the job as far as I was concerned. And that's how a lot of it happened.
What do you think was the biggest challenge or situation that you faced or had to overcome related to your career?
That's a really good question. So far, the things we've talked about sounded like everything was just falling at someone's feet. That's never the case. But at any rate, the biggest thing was when I did fall, that I fell, I see looking back that it took way too long to pick myself up, dust myself off, and get back in the game. Not that the time was not spent well. The time was spent extremely well for my personal growth, but it did take me a couple of years to get back in the game. And I've heard other people say this: everybody fails. Everybody fails. Fail faster. It will help you along. And when you fail, whatever you consider failing to be, pick yours, give yourself a week, maybe 2 weeks outside, and then get back in the game and keep on working. If it's something that you like to do, just keep on doing it. And a lot of stories that have come out of Silicon Valley attest to that as well. You can come up with idea after idea after idea. Some work, some don't. Don't sit around crying. You can just get right back in the game.
What was the failure that you felt was so important at that time?
Well, because we were really specializing in real estate, and real estate was falling off the cliff. It was bound to pull anyone along that was also associated in that industry. So since so many of our clients were in real estate, and they all began to leave all at the same time because they were all falling into some chapter or another, it ended up hurting our income, and therefore it just dwindled. It was very heartbreaking. I can see looking back, there were probably other routes I could have taken, but I think the universe had one more gift for me, and I think it depended on that failure. So I can't be really unhappy about it.
I totally agree with you. I think sometimes the failure creates the fork in the road that you may have sensed was there, but maybe didn't want to take the risk to do, or maybe you didn't even feel the fork or see the fork at that time until something happened like this.
I agree. I think that's very true. I've heard so many stories from other women, and I can sit there and nod my head. You're right, because we sometimes don't look on failure as being opportunity. But a lot of time, and sometimes it's not directly in business. I mean, there's so much emphasis in America about being in business and making money that sometimes we forget that life has other things to offer. And we are not listening clearly enough to our own self. So from that time on, I tried very, very hard to do a lot more listening to myself and the universe.
Well, I have a question that ties right into that. What do you wish someone would have said to you or done for you when you felt stuck or stymied in your life?
Again, one time I remember a time where I was really yelling at God, and I said, I know you're out there somewhere. Well, what good does that do me? I need someone here right now putting their arm around me and telling me everything's going to be okay in the morning. And and then oddly enough, I got a call that very evening from my CPA. He said, I have an extra ticket to the hockey game, and it just occurred to me you might like to go. And I said, I'd love to go. And so he knew the trouble I was going through. If anybody understood, he knew what I was going through. And at the end, he said, I just feel like, he didn't do it. He said, I just feel like putting my arm around you and telling you that everything will be okay in the morning.
And at that point, you're just not sure that it was going to be okay. And it was such a comfort, huh?
It was like the universe answering you.
Yeah. You're currently in Las Vegas, but you're thinking of moving. So what are your plans for the future?
Oh, my problem is I never stop thinking. I'm always dreaming up new ideas. But I have finally finished, I can't say I finished writing the book, because I do have to go back and take off one chapter and edit the ending. Now I have a better, clearer idea about how I want that novel to end. But I really, really want to write more. And it does take time to write. And even though I have some really wonderful things I'm eager to get into, I need to have other things working out in order to do that. Also I feel like a better atmosphere. I think there comes a time when you just feel like you're not in your right place. And I feel that way. So I feel like I need to get back to my roots to some degree, where it's green and I can have more leisure time in the out of doors or in green areas, something that's non-existent in the desert, bless its heart. And I think that we have come to the end of our journey in the desert, and now we're headed back to green acres in Southeast Tennessee.
Well, Pat, it's just been so much fun talking to you. You know, you have led such an interesting life. You still are out there like me saying, hey, I'm not done yet.
That's right.
Looking for that next thing around the corner, which I always am too. You know, another idea, another thought, another, hey, what do you think about this? And I think you're the same way. Is there anything else you'd like to add to our conversation?
I think the one thing is, when you've done as many different things as I've been able to do in this lifetime, I've been privileged to do, and not everything works out. I think the one advice is to be persistent. Trust yourself and be persistent.
Well, that is great advice. And thank you so much for participating with us and giving us all your time. And we wish you loads of success in your new place.
Well, thank you, Nan, and you're invited to come.
I very well might. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Did you enjoy that episode? We appreciate hearing from you, and we'd love to post your review. My email is nan@nanmckayconnects.com. You can find all of our resources, podcast, and YouTube channel from our website, trailblazersimpact.com. Please subscribe, and thanks for being part of our team.